Alright, hi guys. Today we're going to speak about the observer pattern. We're going to talk about what it is, uh, why do we need it, and when should we use it. To start with, really, I think it's best to give an example to explain exactly how we use the observer pattern. Um, let's suppose, for example, we have a post office, right? This is not your normal traditional post office where there is a postman that comes and gives you your letters. Just imagine for a second that you need to physically go to the post office to check whether you received mail or not. So let's say we have a group of people, they are interested in knowing whether there is mail that's arrived for them or not. So how do we do that really? They need to go and check, right? But then how often do you do it? Let's imagine this is your code in this. So how often are you going to put a for loop that checks every 5 minutes? You go and check mail at the post office. Um, 10 minutes and any arbitrary number is clearly not a good solution. Because one, you're wasting people's time because they can be doing something different instead of checking whether there is mail or not for them every time. And also for the post office. The post office could be doing other stuff as well. You don't really want to waste valuable time answering these people's queries every 5 minutes or every 2 seconds or whatever. So this is the first problem. The second problem is that when you code the post office in a way that handles people's requests, uh, you're really restricting yourself. What if now you don't have people but you have a business, and it's a business that's also interested in knowing uh, whether there is mail for them or not. So this is clearly bad design. Now, what we want to do, we want to design our solution in such a way that when there's a new mail that arrives at the post office, then the post office notifies everybody that's interested. So the post office would know who's interested. So if we've got 3 people in a business, and it would notify all of them and say, hey, there's new mail, come on and check. This is one way of designing things. Of course, this is not the only way of doing it, but for keeping it simple, we would assume that the post office is going to just say, hey, there's something new, come and have a look. So this is the first thing. So we sorted the problem where we're not really wasting anybody's time. Now, what happens if these guys now are not only interested in checking mail, but they're also interested in other stuff. Say, for example, a shop, and they want to see whether there's new stocks, the stock has been um, topped up again or not. So really, in your code, you don't really want to every time your people need to check a new object, you want to add code to it. So you want that to be universal. So it's the shop also going to notify everybody whenever there's a new item. Right. Okay. So this is just a quick way. So when do we use it really? We use it when a change in one object requires changing others, and also you don't know how many objects need to be changed. Right. So this is one way. Not how many objects and what type of object need to be changed. Also, you use it when an object should be able to notify other objects without making assumptions about, like I said earlier, who they are or what they are. So you don't want to make them tightly coupled. So let's introduce a little bit of definition in here, and then we'll look at a coding example. So we spoke about post office and shops. These are the guys that need to notify people and businesses. And so clearly here we have 2 different groups. So we have people that are interested in knowing some sort of event happening at the other end of this slide. So the post office and the shop are going to be called subjects, and the people and businesses are going to be observers. So in terms of object-oriented design, you could use different methods, but the most used one is probably an interface. So you want to have 2 different interfaces, one of subject and one of observer, and each concrete class would need to just implement um, these methods that are defined inside the interfaces. We'll give you a more concrete example in a minute. Um, right, okay, so here's an example here. I just provided you with classes that we need. It's just a class of person. It does nothing apart from having a constructor. And this person's got the name. We've got the mail class, just to say that this is a letter. It's got the name of the receiver, the address, and the actual body of the letter, so the content. and it only has a constructor as well for simplicity. We have a post office. Really, a post office is going to have a list of all letters that it's got in stock, and this is just a simple constructor, and it's got a method here to add a new mail item. And this one here, I called it getState. Really, it's just all it's doing is just it's like a getter. It's just returning the instance variables that are here. I'll show you why it's needed. Now, really, we spoke about two different interfaces. So we spoke about subjects and we spoke about observers. So let's start by making a new interface. I'm just going to call this interface a observer. We'll start by sorting the people first. And this is not a class, this is an interface. Right? And like we said earlier, this is just going to have an update method. And that update method, for simplicity, I'm going to keep it void. And it's going to take an object in general as a parameter. Okay? So what we're going to do now, we're going to implement our person class to be an instance of, not an instance, but to implement the observer interface. So let's go and do that now. So we have a person here. First of all, we need to say that it actually implements the observer. And of course it's going to complain because we need to overwrite, well, to write the method. So this is void update. It takes an object like we said. And we're going to do our stuff in here. So we'll come back to this in a minute. Right, I just made that method public there because it was complaining about packages. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to create another one, another interface, and this is going to be the subject one. Okay, so we're going to say this is an interface, and like we said earlier on, it's going to define 3 methods. And what these methods are: attach. We're going to attach an observer. Let's call it observer row. And then we'll detach an observer. I'll explain in a minute. Oh, and also the notify, which is the most important one here at this stage. Right, so what these are supposed to do is our subjects needs to, well, our observers need to register their interest in the subject. So if you have a people interested in the post office, every single instance of person needs to be attached to the subject, to the post office. It's like you register interest for a job alert or for stock alert or anything like that. So it's quite similar. So if we go now to our post office, we're going to make this implement subject. Right? We know this is going to complain, and what we need to keep track of these observers that are registered. So I'm going to put them in an array list. You can put them in any other data structure you want. I'm going to say these are observers, and I'm going to call them observers. Okay. The other thing that I need to do is to just instantiate these as new array list with a constructor, and now I'm going to implement those methods that we had there. So we've got public, attach, and then we said it takes an observer O, public void, sorry. Right, this is all it's going to do is going to add an observer to the list. So all I'm going to say observers.add, add this guy, add him to the list. Detach is just going to remove him. So this is public void detach an observer O, and again we're just going to remove this guy from the list. Observers.remove, and then we'll say O. We also need to implement the notify, public void notify. Well, at this stage here, we're just gonna iterate through every single element of our array list of observers. Say for I equals 0, I smaller than observers dot size, I plus plus. Then all we're gonna do, we're gonna notify them all. So we're gonna say observers dot get. So we'll get the the guy at this index. Okie doke, and then we'll just call the update method for that. Now remember that here this update needs to take an object type as parameter. What this means that here in our case we're going back and saying, hey, I'm sending myself, reference to myself, so I'm a post office, but we could have a different type of subject. So really just so our person knows who is speaking to it. So now that we have a notify method implemented, so what is this complaining about? Right, it was just complaining that I misspelled the detach method there. So what we need to do now, we need to go back to our person class. Now we're calling this update method and we're passing reference to the post office. So what we need to do, we need to handle this. So we need to say when it's a message coming from the post office, then do something about it. So the way we're going to do it in Java is we'll just say if this object is instance of post office, yeah, then what we're going to have to say, post office PO, and then we'll cast the object back to the post office, right? And now I'm gonna define a method. I'll call it check mail, and then I'm gonna pass the PO.getState. So here, let's go back. So the get state, what it does is just gonna give me, what is it again? So the get state, what is it? Here, it's just gonna give me all mail. So it's just gonna give me this. So what I need to do now, I know that it's passing me a list of mail, so I need to iterate through them and check if one of them is mine. So this is what I'm going to do in here. So I'm going to make this one, it doesn't have to be public, but let's just make it public just for now. It doesn't do anything, and we'll call it check mail. And as we said, it takes an array list of type mail, and we'll call it M, right? So what this is going to do, this is going to just check if it belongs to me, print it on the screen. So for I equals 0, and I equals 0, I is smaller than M dot size, I plus plus. Now, just a quick if statement here. If the name, right, dot, I'm just going to compare if the strings are the same. So compare to, and then I'm going to pass it the actual mail. This is not mail, it's M. M dot get I dot receiver name. If that is equals 0, so which means that the two strings have the same value, then what we're going to say, we're going to print that onto the screen. And we're going to just say name plus something like that plus m dot get I dot content. So we're done with this one. Now there's one thing that we forgot to do is in the post office at the moment nothing is happening. So when do we need to notify people? We agreed that we need to notify them when there is a new letter that arrived. So we need to add it here. So we just need to call notify at this stage here. So now we're done with the implementation. We're going to go and test it. We've got a main class here. All it's doing is creating a new post office object. There's two people in there, Chris and John, and then there is a mail for John. As we can see, it needs to go to John. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make them both interested in this. So if we say post office dot attach, and then we'll attach Chris, and then we'll attach John. Attach John. So now both of these people are interested in knowing what's going on at the post office. So all I'm going to do now, I'm going to add this mail, post office dot add mail. I'm going to pass this letter to the post office, And what we should see that John automatically gets notified that there is new mail. He's going to check the post office and finds that there's a letter for him. So let's run this. There you go. So John is printing this. Of course, all the letters arrive to John because his update method is also being called, but there's nothing for him. I mean, to Chris. So there's nothing for him. As you can see, it can be quite easy now to just, if we need, for example, these John and Chris to watch a shop, all we need to do is create another shop class and then make it implement the subject interface and then overwrite these methods, notify, detach, and attach, and that's it. So now, as you can see, it makes things a lot easier to add different objects that you can watch and also add different types of observers that are interested in one object. And I think that's us covered. Thank you.